Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Opinion Machine, the show where we talk about all things gaming. My name is Killjoy, and today I want to talk about my experience playing the Ogryn class in Warhammer 40K Darktide. I've put about 100 hours into this game now, I've played all the classes, and I'm going to give you my experience with these classes. Now, off the bat, I just want to say this, I am not somebody that makes a lot of builds. I just kind of play a class, figure things out on the fly, and that's what I want to do today, is just talk about what I think about the Ogryn as a class in the game, my experience with it. If you're here looking for some kind of intricate build and about all the other fangled doodads as to like how to make the Ogryn play a certain way, this is not the video for you. I will be talking about builds, but I am not an expert on it. I'm just going off a lot more feeling and what I think works for this class versus like actively diving in doing the nitty gritty on it. Alright, so just want to make people aware of that before we do it. So first off, the Ogryn is by far my favourite class in this game. I am always been a big fan of playing like the tank style characters. I like being able to have a lot of health, a lot of defense, and essentially leave the damage dealing and all the other stuff to other people. Now, the way that I built my Ogryn was primarily, originally I was going to be like, oh, there's an ability here on the tree that says you can taunt. But I ended up not doing that at the end. I ended up keeping its basic ability, which is the ability to charge through enemies and knock them on the ground. Because I just love the idea of having this get out of jail free card, as well as an ability that can be augmented in a way to regain toughness and things like that. So, what do I think about the Ogryn as a whole, and how did I play him? So I primarily played the Ogryn as using a cleaver, which is one of the weapons he gets. And one of the guns he uses is called a twin-linked stubber. It's basically a massive machine gun. Those are the main weapons that I used. Overall, the Ogryn seems pretty good at doing crowd control if you use a club-style weapon, which has a large arc and can knock people over. Or you can use the shield, which is another good weapon, which is a very defensive playstyle, but it actually allows you to block and just have all the incoming damage on you, allowing other players like veterans and psychers and things like that to do a ton of damage, essentially. So, my build primarily consisted of me having the cleaver, one of the cleavers, there's two of them, and one of the twin-link stubbers. Now, you do have variants in this game of the same weapons. They do look different, but they act differently in the sense that there are two different knives in the game that the Ogryn gets. One is more of a single target with a crowd hit on the end, and the other one is more of a crowd hit on type knife with a single target hit on the end. I found that because the Ogryn is a bigger, your hitbox is bigger and the height of your character matters, it was quite easy to just hit enemies in the head, especially on the crowds of enemies, and essentially just constantly hit them and get headshots. And I really enjoyed that, dodging back and forth and just taking out swarms of enemies, and it felt very, very good. Now, I use primarily the knife with a ton of toughness builds. Now, toughness is essentially armor in this game. I decided to have a lot of toughness, more so than health, and have toughness reduction and all that sort of stuff, so that I could tank against long-range things like the gunners, like the shotgunners in the game. I had that, and then I went for the twin-link stubber, which there's one that fires really fast and doesn't do a lot of damage, and there's one that's it's not as fast, it doesn't have a massive clip, but it does more damage. It's a little bit more accurate. I went with that. There is another one, but I'm not entirely sure what the difference is between that one as well. It could be just magazine capacity or accuracy. But that's kind of what I went with. That was my loadout. So I was primarily playing a class that was tanky enough to take the damage, but I also had a lot of the skills on my Ogryn that would allow me to get toughness back in multiple ways. Heavy hitting an enemy would bring it back, obviously staying in coherency. Charging, every time I charged through a bunch of enemies, I would gain a ton of toughness back. So I was primarily making this character based around that. Now, I could have gone for taunt rather than charge and played with the shield. I think that combination works pretty well as well. Essentially with the Ogryn, when it comes to melee weapons, you've got three choices. You've got the knives that are the quickest ones, I think, and I will include the shovel in that as well. You then have the clubs, which have the best crowd control, and then you've got the shield, which is a shield in the club, but that's a lot more like very defensive, very specialist one. So essentially you're either doing what I found was to be a lot of damage with a quicker knife, or knocking people for 6 with the club, and you really do knock people for 6, and I completely understand why people would take the club, because it is incredibly hilarious when you just swipe through a bunch of enemies and they just go flying. You also get an electrified club as well, which does more damage. The club, I think, is more effective against the armored enemies, whereas the knife doesn't seem to be as much. But I still preferred the attack speed of the knife, and especially when I augmented my charge, which allowed me to have, I think it's like 5 seconds of 20% attack speed with the knife. You just end up killing a bunch of people. So overall, the playstyle that I have been playing with, I have found very enjoyable. I feel like I'm just the right amount of tanky. I feel I've got some movement options. I feel like I'm doing enough damage to be able to help out. But the cool thing about the Ogryn as a whole is the fact that you do have quite the variance for this tank character. Essentially, you can play the Ogryn as a tank, a very heavy melee damage kind of specialist, or you can play with guns and primarily do a gun build that is all about laying down a ton of suppression fire and a ton of damage with the guns. Now, I think it works best with the twin link stubber, but I think the other guns like the Ripper, which is a type of automatic shotgun, can also be quite good for it. In terms of guns, you do have the 2 shotguns, which is the Ripper and the Kickback. Ripper is an automatic shotgun. The Kickback is a single fire. It looks like a cannon. Single fire does a ton of damage. You have to reload after every shot. You've also got the Rumbler, which is a grenade launcher, and you also have the Grenadier, I think it's Grenadier grenade launcher. The Rumbler is just a standard sort of like grenade launcher. You fire it, you reload it. You can bounce shots off the walls. It's kind of fun, does a lot of damage. The grenade launcher, the Grenadier's Gauntlet, is something that you can also punch with, and it doesn't do as much damage, but it's kind of a melee weapon and a ranged weapon in one, but it also has the unique ability of running up to enemies, punching them, and blowing up a grenade. It's a lot of fun. I think the Ogryn has some of the best weapons in the games in terms of impact and fun. That's why I like the twin link stubber, because it goes to bum 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 and it makes this loud noise, and it's a lot of fun. So yeah, so I primarily played like a tank, but I didn't necessarily go for all the tanky options. The heavy melee damage style of Ogryn looks interesting. It's not one that I tried, but it looks like you can do a ton of toughness from it. You do a ton of damage, you gain extra crit damage, all these kind of things, and you just wail on people, and you're not really looking at using range at all. You're just there doing a lot of it's to do with the heavy melee attacks. So if you've got a weapon that can swing quite far, I can understand you using like a club or something there, because you hit so many enemies. And what's really fun about the Ogryn is, regardless of the style, you've also got like your auras and grenade types and abilities and things that can really augment it. Now, I primarily went with box of grenades, which essentially starts off as you chuck a box at someone and it kills them. And you upgrade it so that when you chuck that box of grenades spew out of it and it blows up in an area effect. I absolutely love it. I think it is one of the best skills in the entire game, just because you instantly get to like knock someone on their ass or kill an enemy and then blow up all the enemies around it. It's a lot of fun. But the Ogryn's other grenades are also kind of crazy. You can choose the Ogryn frag grenade, which is insane. If you like to do single target damage, that's really good. Against the monstrosities like the mini bosses you come across, you chuck a Ogryn frag at it and it pretty much takes half its health off. The way it works is it's got a 16 meter radius explosion, which compared to the other grenades is massive. You only get one of them, but when you chuck it in, it blows up. A lot of damage in the center, gets less as it goes out, but it is a crazy grenade. Like, absolutely nuts. You've also got the rock, and the rock grenades are just rocks and junks that you can chuck. They're single target. It's really funny watching somebody like hoof a rock and then whack like a sniper from halfway across the map, because you can chuck them really far, and you automatically get those back as time goes on. They're not particularly great against armored enemies, according to the description, but they are an interesting style of grenade. They are very much a single target, let me take out this key unit. And I think overall, the Ogryn's grenades, like, they're all about chucking something heavy, but I think they're kind of the most fun. That's not to say the other grenades in the game are bad. I think it's just the idea of him chucking a box of grenades that then spews out and blows up and the rockets. So me and the guys that have been playing this game, all of our Ogryns are different, pretty much. Like my brother uses the rocks, which I get. Like they recharge for free, so why not? I use boxer grenades. I've seen the Ogryn frag grenade. They're all kind of crazy. So there's a lot of you can play like a very heavy tanky style of the Ogryn, and then have maybe the frag grenade to deal with the big guys, or you could be a very much a gun based dude with the rocks to deal with single target enemies that get close, or you can just be like, I just need some area effect, chuck the boxer grenades at your feet and bang. You then have the different abilities. I've only used Charge. I've seen Taunt in action as well. Charge is basically your Ogryn runs through a bunch of things, knocks them all over. It's a lot of fun. I really, really, really like it. I think that's one of my favourite abilities as well. Taunt's really cool because if you've got the shield or you want to protect your teammates, you smack Taunt, all the enemies come at you, which is a really... I think out of all three abilities, it might be the most powerful that the Ogryn has, because being able to distract all the enemies in the immediate vicinity, and you can upgrade it to be bigger than that, does wonders for the rest of the team, right? Like, you can see the veteran or the zealot or the psyker. If they're dealing with a lot, you can just smash the taunt button. Now they're on you, which is fine if you've got a shield or something that just deals with groups. Allows them to do all the damage dealing and all that sort of stuff. I really like it. I think it's really cool. Point blank barrage I have not used, but it seems like it reloads the gun and just does a shit ton of like attack speed. The idea of playing like an Ogryn with a gun and all the gun abilities and all the gun upgrades and like getting toughness and stuff that way seems really interesting. I will need to like report back on that when I've played it, but it does seem really cool. And then you've got like the auras for the Ogryn, which you've got like one that increases its heavy attack damage, one that increases toughness reduction for you and your team, and then also suppress damage for you and your allies. So that's kind of like, what do you prefer? Do you want to do more melee? Do you want to have increased toughness reduction, which is what I went for, because again I was playing more of a tanky style. And then you've got the suppressed damage, which means that you and your allies, while you're suppressing, any allies around you can do more damage to it. And then lastly, you've got the keystones, which are the final abilities on the skill tree for the Ogryn, which also help diversify the Ogryn, which is Feel No Pain, which essentially gives you a bunch of stacks, like a passive ability that helps regen your toughness. You gain them back, you lose them. It's basically toughness if you're playing that way. Heavy Hitter, which is to do with getting the ability to gain extra, I think it's either extra damage or extra crit damage the more heavy melee attacks you land, and that stacks, so you're not doing a ton of melee damage. And then Burst Limit Override, which sounds kind of nuts, which is you have bullets that do, it's either instant crit or don't cost ammo or something like that, and it seems like it's pretty good. Honestly, I haven't tried it. All in all, I think the Ogryn is a really fun class. Out of the four classes, it's my favourite. It was the one I started with. It suits my playstyle. I'm not sitting here saying that it is the best class in the game. It might not be. That's probably the Psyker or the Veteran, or I don't even know, maybe the Zealot. But for me, when you get the ability to have a class that just deals with a lot of the specialists quite well, the one thing I've noticed as well with the Ogryn, the way that I built him, was that gunners and shotgunners became a non-issue. It wasn't until I switched to the other classes where I was like, man, gunners and shotgunners are really annoying. Whereas this the Ogryn, it was very easy to get in on them or to charge them down or just run up to them. The ones I struggle with the most with the Ogryn is the Trapper, because your hitbox is bigger. You know, and that just takes time. You just got to get used to how trappers work and avoiding and hiding behind things and all that sort of stuff. But in terms of the other specialists, shotgunners especially don't seem to knock you back as far. I don't know if that's true or not, but it didn't feel like it. As well as gunners, I could deal with them easier. Like, I just found this class just deals with certain specialists on an easier level than the other classes do. I think if you like playing a tank, I think if you like the idea of just running around with a big weapon and smacking things, or you like the idea of just standing still and gunning down enemies, that this is the class for you. I really like a lot of the skill trees. There's some really cool augments to abilities. There's really cool augments to help for either toughness or damage and crit stuff like that. Good choice of grenades, good choice of abilities. Like, overall, this class felt a lot of fun, and that's probably the best way to describe it. It's a lot of fun to play this class. It also helps that his lines, the dialogue in the game is really funny, so it's like, oh, cool. But as someone who's enjoyed playing it, and I plan on playing some different variations of the Ogryn now, especially the gun style, like with, that sounds really interesting to me. But as a tank, oh my god, ton of fun. The only downside is you will find you'll get in the way of your allies, which is, I do feel bad because I've had this happen to me where you're trying to shoot stuff and then the Ogryn just runs in front of you and you end up shooting the Ogryn in the ass. But overall, I just think, like, if you like playing that frontline tank and you like being like either crowd controlling the enemies or you want to taunt the enemies, things like that, like dealing with the big hordes, the Ogryn is the perfect class for that. Whereas I think like the Zealot, who I'll look at, is much more damage dealy, kind of let the Zealot deal with dealing the damage while the Ogryn pulls. Because you've got basically in this game, you've got the Ogryn and the Zealot being like what I would call the frontliners, and then you've got like the Veteran and the Psychers like the, I don't say sideliners, but the guys at the back. They're the ones doing the damage probably. But yeah, if you have any interest in and you're curious about playing the Ogryn, I'd say just jump in. Find a weapon that suits you, find a playstyle that suits you, but all in all, my experience with the Ogryn has been a ton of fun, and in this style of game, where it's a horde-based game, even though I've enjoyed the other classes, like this really just stands out for me as the most fun, and just when you get to mess around with the abilities and the things that the Ogryn gets to use, it is a ton of fun, and just ultimately, once you get to level 30 and you can start tweaking that build that you want, like whether it be toughness, like my toughness hardly ever goes down on my Ogryn, like that's how fun it is, just being like, right, let's just go, I can charge into battle and all that. But hopefully this just gives you an idea that if you are looking at playing this game and you've been thinking about a class, feel free to start with the Ogryn. I think it's the easiest class, but that might just be my own bias. But if you're looking at playing a character that does a lot of damage, this might not be the class for you. You might want to look at the Psyker or the Veteran. And I will end up doing videos on those as well. But I want to start with the one that I enjoyed the most. And hopefully, that's given you a good impression of my experience playing the Ogryn. So that's going to do it for me today then, guys. Thank you very much for watching the video as always. If you like the video, hit like. If you want to see more content like this, and hit subscribe. Links for Facebook and Twitter will be down below in the description as always. And until next video, I will see you then.